Can you please not come in from tomorrow? That's what the boss's daughter, the manager, said to me as soon as I arrived at the office. I knew she didn't like me, but I didn't realize it was to this extent. Stunned, I decided to comply with her words. However, days later, the manager would end up apologizing to me. My name is Ben Jones. I had finally been assigned to the planning department I'd always wanted to join since joining the company. And I was diligently working every day. But I had a problem. My boss, the manager, was giving me a hard time every day. Since the manager is the president's daughter, I couldn't oppose her and had no choice but to endure. Then, one day, upon arriving at the office, I was called by the manager. "Manager, did you want to see me? Do you know why you're here?" "No, I don't." "Ha, you really have no idea. That's what I hate about low-ranking college graduates." "I'm sorry. I was constantly told that the university I graduated from was low-ranking, and that I wasn't fit to be under her. Except for me, everyone in this department had a stellar background, and I was an unwelcome presence. I've decided, please, don't come in starting from tomorrow." "Wait, what do you mean?" "Nobody expects anything from a plan made by someone from a low-ranking school. The company doesn't need or want useless baggage like you." "Ha, serves you right." The manager's entourage also laughed at me. "Are you saying I'm fired? Is that a done deal?" "I'm the one saying it. Daddy would obviously agree. You should be thankful you got to work here this long." No matter what plan I came up with, it was always rejected without even a glance. Though I had been enduring, I never thought I'd be told to leave the company. "Understood. May I ask about the copyright of my previous plans?" "We don't need plans that are as worthless as trash." "I see." I completed the resignation procedures that very day. Months later, I started working at a different company, and one day, my voicemail was filled with numerous messages. "Please come back to the company. Can you at least contact us once?" The caller was the previous company's president. It had been a while since I quit, and I found it odd, so I didn't pick up the phone. However, after repeated calls, which started affecting my work, I reluctantly decided to call back. As soon as I made the call, the president answered. "Ben, why did you leave the company?" "The manager told me to quit." "That must have been a misunderstanding. Please come back, we're in trouble without you here." The president seemed very flustered. Unlike the manager, the president had always valued me. However, he had turned a blind eye to the harassment I endured. I couldn't see myself wanting to return to such a company. "I am no longer associated with that company." I said that, intending to hang up the phone. "We can sort this out if we talk. I'll bring my daughter along next time so we can discuss this." The president said that before I hung up. Without responding, I ended the call. Later, when I arrived at work, I was told I had visitors. Thinking it couldn't be, I headed to the reception room and there they were, the former company's president and the manager. "President, you really came. And how do you know I'm working at this company?" "The company I currently work for is a rival of my previous one." "Hey, Pen, I used my connections to find you. For now, just take a seat." Reluctantly, I sat down, making eye contact with the manager. Wondering if she truly came to apologize, she suddenly slammed her hand on the table. "This makes no sense. Why should I have to come all this way for someone like him?" "Excuse me. If you want to talk, you should be the one coming to me." Far from apologizing, she was yelling at me. "I don't really have anything to say. It's ridiculous to quit just because you got a little scolded at work." "Quit because I was scolded? What do you mean?" "I gave advice on your plan, but you didn't want to take it, so you quit. That's not how a professional behaves." I couldn't comprehend what the manager was saying. "That's not how it happened. I was suddenly told not to come to the company." "You think just because I'm the president's daughter, I got my position through connections, and you don't want to take advice from me?" The manager kept spouting nonsense without caring about what I had to say. "Wait, That's not true. You never even looked at my plans. Dad, I've been enduring until now, but I can't anymore. He always looked down on me because I'm a woman, got mad for a little scolding. Saying that, the manager ignored my words and acted as if she was seeking comfort from the president. My daughter was treated like that. None of that is true. So, you're saying her crying is a lie? I'm disappointed, Pen. I didn't think you were that kind of person. Hearing the president's words, the manager glanced at me and smirked. Moreover, it's outrageous to get re-employed by a rival company. I really wanted to continue working in the same field. That's why I made the difficult decision to join this company. That was the truth. Even after joining the planning department I aspired for, I was completely ignored by the manager and never got the chance to prove my capabilities. I couldn't bring myself to leave this industry. And my current company welcomed me. You must have sold our company's information to get this job, right? Why else would they hire someone as incompetent as you? I did no such thing. I've maintained confidentiality, and this company never asked me for any information. People can say anything. In fact, our company has. Stop, don't say another word. The president hastily interrupted the manager. Was she about to say something they didn't want me to hear? Humph, such a useless person. This company should fire him. A low-rank individual only brings shame. If Ben apologizes, I might consider taking him back. I'll even reassign him to the planning department he wishes for. Nick, we don't need someone like him. Just bear with it and continue as usual. We'll manage. Then, I want a raise. The two of them continued discussing without any regard for my opinion. I've repeatedly expressed my unwillingness to return, yet why am I being told to apologize and be forgiven? I was so frustrated by being treated like a fool that I was trembling. The manager noticed that. Oh, are you crying with joy? It figures. Low-ranked individuals really can't help themselves. You really are a kind soul, aren't you? Kind. Sure, I am. Taking someone like him back is nothing short of generous. Just make sure you don't irritate me too much. Make sure you listen to your boss, okay? I'll sort things out with this company. I have no intention of leaving this company. You still don't get it. I'm offering to take care of you before you get fired for incompetence. You really are clueless. That's the way it is, but don't quit over a little scolding this time. Saying that, the president and the manager mocked me. Mr. President, if I may be so bold, the manager is lying. What, after all we've been saying, you're taking this attitude? I'm not lying. That's quite the accusation. Do you have any evidence to back that up? Yes, I prepared this, just in case. I said that and took a voice recorder out of my bag. I had recorded not only the day the manager told me to leave, but also any other occasions when she had said something unreasonable. What, you've been recording me? Unbelievable. At the sight of the voice recorder, the manager visibly panicked. Dad, we don't need to listen to this. Let's just go. Then, I'll play it. I played the recording, ensuring the manager, who was trying to leave, could hear it. The recording clearly captured the manager's voice telling me not to come to the company. What's the meaning of this? My daughter was lying. It's a lie. Days more. I went on to reveal all the unfair treatment I had received from the manager. The recording included the sound of my proposal being torn up, the manager and her entourage bad-mouthing me during work hours, and a crucial exchange where I asked why my proposals were never reviewed, and she replied, "A low-ranked individual like you, your ideas are as expected." It was undeniable proof that the manager had been lying. By the way, this is the proposal that the manager tore up. I said that and handed a freshly printed proposal to the president. He took it, visibly shaken, and started reading. This proposal, no way. It's the plan for the hit product this company is currently selling. This was a project I had put my heart and soul into, hoping to get the manager's approval. But all my efforts were in vain. The proposal was torn up without even being read. What? Why did you reject this proposal? You didn't even look at it. Well, his proposals were always so pathetic, I thought there was no need to read them. It's his fault for always behaving badly. By the way, I submitted several other proposals like this, but none were ever reviewed. I said that and handed another set of documents to the president. Most of them were products that had been developed since I moved to my current company. So it's all true, this too, these were Ben's plans. Yes, I worked hard, hoping to be recognized by the manager, but not once did she look at my proposals. Why would you do something so foolish? I'm not the one at fault here. Wait, these plans were all developed by this company, right? That's a violation of copyright law. What are you going to do about that? Indeed, if we sue, we'll win, right? The president, who had been flustered until a moment ago, suddenly seemed to regain his composure, and retorted. The manager looked at me as if to say she'd gotten the upper hand. Manager, don't you remember? What? When I left, you promised to transfer all the copyrights of my projects to me, didn't you? I never said that, I don't remember. You're probably going to say you recorded it, right? What's the point of such verbal agreement evidence? No, it's not just that, I got it in writing with your signature. I said that and showed a piece of paper to the manager. It clearly stated that the copyrights belonged to me, acknowledged and signed by the manager. What? I don't remember signing this. The manager seemed quite flustered upon seeing the document. When I submitted my resignation paperwork, I included this document and got your signature on all the papers. That's sneaky, making me sign something hidden. It wasn't hidden. Didn't you even read the documents you were signing? That's right. Why would you sign something without reading it? Oh no. The manager's face turned pale. As this document states, I hold all the copyrights. I see, I understand. It seems my daughter was really in the wrong. Dad, don't say such terrible things. Shut up. Do you have any idea how much profit you've cost us? Ugh. Ben, no, Mr. Jones, won't you please consider coming back to our company? I promise to offer you a higher position than before, a better one than your current company can provide. What about me then? You were not ready for the manager position. Start from the beginning again. The president's words made the manager crumble. But such things no longer mattered to me. The president was desperately trying to win me over. So, what do you say? Have you changed your mind about returning? There's no one left to give you a hard time anymore, you know. The president, eyes gleaming, pressed me for an answer. Wanting to leave this situation, I asked the president a question. There's something I want to ask. Sure, ask me anything. It hasn't been long since I left your company, so why are you so desperate to bring me back now? Well. The president's voice suddenly faded. We've been very busy recently. I thought about addressing it sooner, but I couldn't find the time, sorry. I didn't miss the president's eyes darting around as he made excuses. Is that so? Because it seemed like you were mostly playing golf when I was working there. That was necessary for business networking. If you want, I can take you with me from now on. No, that's all right. Feel free to reach out anytime. You're going to be our star player from now on. The president kept talking as if my return to the company was a foregone conclusion. Though he was making concessions, I felt the pressure of don't go against the president. There must be a reason you want me back in the company so badly. Reason? It's nothing grand. I just want to make things right for you, especially since my daughter caused you trouble. The president seemed to be dodging the issue with smooth talk. But I knew the president's real motive, making this all a futile effort. Our company's performance has been growing, and your company has started to stagnate, right? After I joined, the products I planned hit the market successfully, skyrocketing sales and rapidly increasing the company's reputation. I even got interviewed on TV as the planner. Compared to this thriving company, the president's company's performance had been lackluster. Being a traditional company, it failed to incorporate anything new and lacked buzz. Once seen as rivals, the difference between the two companies is now like night and day. Did you see me on TV? Is that why you hastily contacted me? Well, what was it again? Didn't you realize I had left, or that your company's performance wasn't growing until you saw me on TV? I had a lot I wanted to say. Why did he ignore the harassment I was receiving? Why didn't he inquire when I had to leave abruptly for an unreasonable reason? But conveying that to the president now meant nothing. There's no need for me to be involved anymore. Did you think I was unaware of everything? You're a spiteful person. Yes, our company is in a pinch. If you know that, come back quickly. I have no intention of leaving this company. Are you defying me? I was the one who transferred you, a low-ranked college graduate, to the planning department. Are you repaying my kindness with betrayal? I am grateful for being placed in the planning department and offered many ideas in response. However, it was the president's kin who refused to accept them. How dare you speak to me like that? As the president raised his voice, the door to the reception room opened. Our Ben has been of great service to us. Boss. We're in the middle of something. I can't have you entering unannounced. With all due respect, it's also a nuisance for our company when you come without an appointment. Occupy the reception room and tie up our valuable employee. A person of your level shouldn't be so arrogant. Who do you think I am? My apologies. May I offer you my business card? My boss said that and presented a business card to the president. Humph. The president snatched a business card, and his face turned pale as he read it. My father is busy, so I came in his stead. I will be serving as the CEO from next year. My boss, like the manager, was the son of the company's president and an extremely capable person, set to become the new president next year. I had no idea. My apologies. No problem. We're grateful for the talented individual you provided us. The president bowed, trembling. I was puzzled as to why the president was so anxious. However, we will have to decline the collaboration project you proposed recently. What? You said you consider it to help our company. I did consider it, even though it's a rival company. Seeing a traditional manufacturer falter doesn't feel right. Then why? Seeing the character of you and your daughter, I couldn't bring myself to support you. Please reconsider. I apologize for everything. Watching the president desperately apologizing to my boss, the manager seemed to finally realize the gravity of the situation. Please, help me out here. I'm sorry. It's my boss's decision. There's nothing I can do. No way. After that, the president and the manager were escorted out by the security guards. Ben, I believe in you. I'll be waiting. The president shouted as he left. I just watched him go. Later, I heard that the manager's company's performance continued to plummet, making management difficult. The calls kept coming after that day, so I've changed my phone number. Meanwhile, the company I work for continues to grow rapidly. I want to keep working here for the foreseeable future.
I really dislike you. Choose between getting fired or being demoted. I was stunned by what the executive vice president, Chris, said to me. Tomorrow is the final stage of the business negotiation, and he suddenly demanded to take over my role as the negotiator. I never thought he was capable of such an emotional outburst. What's wrong? It's your fault. You're being punished for outshining me. Chris, who is the same age as me, just couldn't stand my success. I have no attachment to a company where my superiors steal my credit. I'm quitting. I'll leave tomorrow's negotiation to you, EVP. With that, I quickly left the conference room. Just before the negotiation, President John looked puzzled as his son, Chris, proudly declared he would handle it himself. What are you talking about? This matter was supposed to be handled by Mike. I fired him yesterday, Chris said proudly, making his father glare at him. Why did you fire him? Didn't you look at the negotiation materials? What? Frantically flipping through the documents, Chris found a critical sentence he had overlooked, and his face turned pale. My name is Mike, a 43-year-old employee. In fact, I've changed jobs 3 times already. It wasn't because of layoffs during a recession or bankruptcy, but it's a hassle to explain. So I said it was for career advancement during my 4th job interview. Some companies accepted that without issue. However, there was one man who saw through the lie. It was Vice President David who conducted my final interview. No, that's not it. You don't seem like someone who changes jobs for career advancement. And if it were for career advancement, you'd aim higher. Our company and your previous one are the same size, just dealing with different products. What's your real motive? Be honest. Sharp, I thought, impressed. I shrugged and told him the real reason, and David pondered deeply. I see. I understand your reason and why you'd hide it. Okay, got it. Leave it to me. With a sly grin, David ended the interview, leaving me unsure if I had passed. I waited anxiously for a couple of days, and when the notification arrived, I was shocked. It said they wanted to hire me as a sales manager. What does this mean? I applied for a supervisor position in the sales department. Panicked, I called to see if there was some mistake, and David laughed heartily. The current sales manager is just about to retire. With your background, Mike, there's no issue with you taking his place. Besides, a manager's role is to lead, not to be led. You understand what I mean, right? Finally understanding David's thinking, I gratefully accepted the job offer. The workplace I joined wasn't uncomfortable at all. I found it odd that there were few employees in my age, but interacting with the younger staff was refreshing. Even though I entered with a manager's status, I thought I might struggle with the transition, but there were no problems at all. The retiring sales manager, who was already mentally checked out and dreaming of fishing trips, generously shared his work tips with me. My subordinates also preferred having a younger boss over the current tech-averse manager. However, there's always someone who wants to complain. 6 months later, when I started giving orders in place of the retired sales manager, EVP Chris was the one who openly criticized me. I still remember his first complaint. We submit consolidated business negotiation reports to the executive meeting every month. But he was the only one who insisted that I should have sought his instructions beforehand. The other executives, confused by his words, looked at me, also puzzled. Having no choice, I asked Chris. Excuse me, EVP Chris, what instructions should I have sought? Chris, unable to hide his irritation, started throwing complaints at me. Listen, you just took over from your predecessor, right? You're like a rookie driver. So before you take any action, you should check with me or the other executives to make sure it's okay. Comparing me with my experience at several companies to a rookie driver was quite the stretch. While I was trying to figure out how to respond, David skillfully intervened. Mike has the endorsement of his predecessor, EVP Chris. I've also interviewed the sales staff, and they say it's easier to work now than before. I believe we can trust Mike to handle things. The other executives nodded in agreement with David's convincing words. President John, still looking displeased with Chris, reprimanded him. There's an old saying, a person with high abilities can't perform if they're constantly second-guessed. From now on, negotiations will be managed by the sales department and Mike. Understood. I thought that was the end of it. But Chris must have been annoyed that David and John had backed me up. After that, he started causing small disruptions across the sales department. Again, how many times has it been now? The subordinate in front of me shrank back apologetically. I've seen this apologetic look on my subordinates' faces many times lately, and my patience was wearing thin. It all started with minor issues. Samples needed for negotiations arriving late, or promotional items not being ordered for some reason. Even though the sales department handles negotiations, we can't do it all on our own from start to finish. We rely heavily on support from departments like materials and general affairs. However, lately, we haven't been getting that support. The reason behind this was Chris. Of course, each department has its own supervisors, but no one can go against the directives of EVP Chris. When Chris directly told them to delay the arrival of samples or to prioritize other orders over promotional items, they complied. I don't entirely blame them, though it would have been nice if they'd informed the sales department beforehand. Up until now, my subordinates managed by using alternative samples or other solutions to deal with the delays. But finally, We uncovered sabotage that could decisively damage our negotiations. We had reserved a room at a hotel for the meeting, but it was inexplicably cancelled yesterday. When we checked with the hotel, they told us that someone from our company had called to cancel the reservation. I was certain it was Chris's doing. We could inform our clients and change the meeting location, but making a last-minute change might cause suspicion that we were up to something. If one side becomes paranoid, even a negotiation that should go smoothly can become much more difficult. To successfully conclude the deal, we might have to make significant concessions, which would mean losses for our company. With this in mind, I decided to confront Chris directly. I couldn't let Chris's sabotage delay the negotiations any further. Most importantly, it would be too cruel to let my subordinates' hard-earned appointments go to waste because of this. Fueled by determination, I barged into the EVP's office, but as expected, Chris insisted on his innocence. The hotel room was cancelled. What does that have to do with me? It's your mistake. We reserved the room months in advance. A sudden cancellation like this couldn't be a mistake by my subordinates. The only people who knew the room number were the subordinate who booked it, me, the client's representative, and the finance team member handling the payment. Naturally, the finance department was under Chris's control. Still, he tried to play dumb. This is pointless. Instead of making these accusations, why don't you focus on getting more appointments? Whether it's an accusation or not, we can confirm with the hotel. They record all calls for their protection. If we get a copy of the recording and compare it to the voices of our finance team members, we'll know the truth immediately. Chris fell silent at once. He always clammed up when things turned against him. Although I could have pressed him harder, I decided that securing the upcoming negotiation was more important than dealing with him right now. The negotiation you're sabotaging is going to be a major one. If you interfere any further, I'll take this to the president. Playing the call recorded at the executive meeting will make the president believe me instantly. He might protect his son and turn against me, but if that happens, I'll resign. With that determination in my voice, Chris looked away. However, I might have been naive to think this would be the end of his interference. Instead of stopping his petty sabotage, Chris decided to take my work away at the worst possible moment. Despite the disruptions, including the hotel room change, the negotiation was nearing the successful conclusion I aimed for. Tomorrow, the top executives would arrive to finalize the contract. At least, that's what I thought until I was summoned to the EVP's office first thing in the morning. I can't leave an important negotiation to someone like you, so I'll take over. Don't worry about it. Why? What have I done wrong? Chris frowned. That's exactly the problem. Why can't you just say yes to orders from your boss? I really don't like you. Choose between getting fired or being demoted. We don't need you for this job. Tomorrow was the final stage of the negotiation, and Chris's demand to take over as the negotiator left me stunned. I never imagined he would make such an emotional statement. What's wrong? It's your fault. You're being punished for outshining me. Chris, the same age as me, couldn't stand my success. He had been secretly sabotaging me. But seeing me overcome those obstacles and stand on the brink of closing the deal, he finally decided to act directly. When I stayed silent for a while, Chris spoke with a gleeful expression. You were getting cocky just because you speak only English. Right. Your resume shows you worked at 3 different trading companies. We've got plenty of people who can speak English at your level here. I almost asked how he knew the details of my resume, but then I remembered that human resources was also under Chris's control. Knowing him, he probably forced the HR manager to show it to him. EVP, what's your point? I asked calmly, and Chris snorted. I'm saying, don't act all high and mighty just because you speak only English. I can speak English too. So we don't need you for tomorrow's negotiation. Chris genuinely believed that my business English skills were the key to finalizing the deal. His misunderstanding was laughable, but I didn't feel like correcting him. Besides, I have no attachment to a company where superiors steal the credit. I'm quitting. I'll leave tomorrow's negotiation to you, EVP. With that, I quickly left the conference room. Angry and determined to pack my things and leave, I headed to the sales department and ran into David by chance. What's wrong? Why do you look like that? Seeing my stern expression, David seemed to sense something was up. David invited me to his office and asked what had happened. So, I laid out all of Chris's misdeeds, including the previous sabotage. After hearing everything, David closed his eyes and looked up, deep in thought. Was he going to say he couldn't believe me either? If so, I was ready to leave quietly. Just as I steeled myself for that possibility, David spoke. EVP Chris. He did it again. There was a hint of bitterness in his tone. Again, what do you mean by that? Instead of answering, David responded with another question. Mike, didn't you find it strange in the executive meetings? What was strange, I wondered. Seeing my confusion, David gave a small smile and answered. No one your age except you attended those meetings, right? At first, I thought it was simply because the people in those positions were older, but then I realized that can't be right. Even for a mid-sized trading company that handles a wide range of products, it doesn't make sense. Even if the senior executives happen to be older, people like my predecessor, the sales manager, would eventually retire. Normally, the second in command of the department would take over, so it wouldn't be unusual for someone younger than Chris to be in the executive meetings. Yet, in those meetings, the youngest attendees were EVP Chris and me, the sales manager. With growing suspicion, I voiced my thoughts. There must have been many capable people younger than EVP Chris. Has this situation really been going on all this time? David frowned and slowly nodded. Chris joined the company about 5 years ago after his previous company went under. The president's ex-wife asked him to help out, so he reluctantly brought Chris on board. Oh, and the president has remarried, so there is another heir. Chris knows this too, which fuels his rivalry with men his age. So that's why Chris and John have different last names despite being family. But even knowing this, I still couldn't understand the reason behind it. Seeing my confusion, David continued with a bitter smile. You might not get it because you're skilled. But Chris came from a completely different industry with no knowledge. His position as the president's son would eventually be taken by the actual heir. For someone like him, youth is a kind of weapon. Even if he is considered young, he's in his 40s. Seeing my perplexed expression, David patiently explained further. You see, before you joined, EVP Chris could say whatever he wanted. He'd make claims like this will appeal to the younger generation, or young people want this kind of product. I always thought it was bold to say such things without data to back them up. But the president and the other executives, who are 20 years older, listened to his speeches thinking that's how it was. With this explanation, I started to understand what David was getting at. Is it because having someone the same age around would challenge him? David nodded with a bitter expression. Instead of earning qualifications needed for the trading company or attending study sessions, EVP Chris chose the easy way. He figured if he eliminated peers from the company, his opinions would be more respected as the youngest person in the room. As a result, employees in their late 30s to 40s who were in supervisory roles became targets for Chris. Any noticeable behavior would immediately be met with harassment or false accusations of mistakes. Anyone with a normal sense of self-preservation would naturally resign. Thus, the current workforce consisted of either older employees like the president or young staff just a few years into their careers. No wonder there were no people in their 40s like me around. EVP Chris is like a veteran office lady bullying the new female employees. These underhanded harassments were only discovered when the victim was about to leave. Even I couldn't do much about it. I did mention it to the president, but he couldn't believe his son would be so petty and jealous. He dismissed it as unbelievable. According to the company's website, John built this company from the ground up. A fierce competitor in the business world. John wouldn't understand the mindset of EVP Chris, who undermined others just to be the youngest in the room. However, leaving the situation unchecked, I knew all too well what would happen. My previous company failed because they left that jealousy unchecked. I decided to confront David directly. Executive Vice President David, what do you want for this company? David looked confused. What do I want? Well, I hope we can continue to grow our revenue and profits. The president's successor is also very capable, though he's still a student. David's eyes pleaded for me to overlook Chris's harassment for now. Given David's long tenure with the company, he likely didn't want to stir up trouble in an environment where he was comfortable with his colleagues. But I believed that this desire to maintain the status quo was the greatest risk. I decided to reveal something to David that I hadn't mentioned even during my interview. You know why I changed jobs 3 times, right? Yeah, you said you were driven out due to jealousy. It was a foolish thing for them to do, but it's been our gain since we've acquired such a talented person. Taking a deep breath and gathering my resolve, I continued. Actually, those 3 companies no longer exist. Through splits, dissolutions, and bankruptcies, they're no longer operating as companies. David's expression turned to one of shock. That can't be. When we did a background check before hiring you, their businesses were still doing well. If you doubt me, check those companies' websites now. David pulled out his smartphone and started searching. His face was growing more shocked by the second. You're right. But how could this have happened? It's simple. The people who drove me out because of their jealousy became more confident after that. They did the same thing to others. You can imagine what happens when that cycle repeats, right? I spoke in a gentle yet firm tone. A company can't function without people. If the people inside abandon it, the company can't maintain its form. Then, pressing further, I spoke to David, whose expression had grown serious. If this continues, this company will eventually face the same fate. Honestly, Chris's harassment had been petty compared to what I experienced at my previous companies. But it was becoming a significant issue. Chris had pushed me to either get fired or be demoted. If I decided to quit, it would be a significant victory for Chris, and he would likely repeat this behavior. The future is far from prosperous. Whether my words resonated with him or not, David fell silent for a moment before nodding firmly. I understand what you're saying, Mike. I'm not going to stand by and watch anymore. Ruining the company out of jealousy is no joke. I felt relieved. With David on my side, we could take drastic measures if needed. After consulting with David, I headed to HR to pick up the resignation paperwork with a light step. Just before the negotiation, John looked puzzled as Chris's son proudly declared he would handle it. What are you talking about? This was supposed to be handled by Mike. I fired him yesterday, Chris's son said proudly, causing John to glare at him. It's fine, I can speak English too. All that's left is to sign the contract. He started to say, but John, red with anger, cut him off. Why did you fire him? Have you not reviewed the negotiation documents? Today, the top executives from the other side are coming. How do you plan to manage without him? Chris, who had assumed it was just a formality, was stunned by John's outburst. Frantically flipping through the documents, Chris found a critical sentence he had overlooked, and his face turned pale. I received a call an hour before the negotiation. They already knew I wasn't there from the morning. Getting a call now meant Chris had been frantically searching for a replacement until the last minute. Of course, he wouldn't have found one right before the event. Despite John constantly reprimanding him for this lack of preparation, Chris still didn't get it. I answered the call with a faint yawn. Yeah, what is it? I got the resignation paperwork from HR yesterday. I'll fill it out and mail it in the next day or two, but I'm taking paid leave today, so I'm off. You don't need to resign, just come to the hotel right now. Hearing the desperation in Chris's voice made me laugh. EVP Chris, isn't that quite different from what you said yesterday? Didn't you boast that you didn't need me? I didn't know the contract would be in Arabic. I could imagine Chris turning pale on the other end of the line. He must have only just realized the contract was to be conducted in Arabic, a fact clearly stated in the negotiation documents. If he'd been involved from the start and reviewed the documents, he would have known this. Our new client was a top-tier company from the Middle East, led by a highly nationalistic CEO. The company's official language was Arabic, and they only accepted documents in Arabic. But in this globalized world, trying to do business solely in your native language is impractical. That's why we always conducted negotiations in English when contracting with foreign companies. In these cases, only the agent with authority would be involved, and the top executives would stay in the background. The top executives only appeared at the very end, which was quite challenging. This is because the top executives would only sign the contract if the negotiation was conducted in Arabic, and the process was explained based on documents prepared in Arabic. Despite being a top-notch company with a desirable market, few international partnerships existed because many companies couldn't overcome this hurdle. However, I had made a good impression from the start by occasionally negotiating with the agent in Arabic. My specialty is speaking 7 languages. Telling a joke in Arabic is a piece of cake for me. But if the negotiation lead suddenly changed, and the top executive, who had been assured by their agent that this company was reliable, was only addressed in English, it would clearly be a disaster. The top executive would feel insulted, and the deal would fall through. It's clearly stated in the documents, isn't it? I didn't know isn't an excuse. Well, good luck. As I dismissed him, Chris, now desperate, started accusing me. Wait, you only speak English. Why didn't you put that on your resume? That's fraudulent hiring. I couldn't help but laugh. Fraudulent hiring? Are you serious? If I had lied, that would be one thing. But not listing all my qualifications isn't fraud. And besides, I never said I only spoke English. I added, as Chris replied in a resentful tone. Why didn't you make such an impressive skill public? That's strange. If Chris had the same skill, he would brag about it and use it to his advantage at every opportunity. That's the crucial difference between us. But I didn't owe him any explanation. More importantly, what are you going to do about the negotiation? If things continue like this, it's almost certain to fall apart. I heard a low, growling sound from the other end of the line, followed by the sound of teeth grinding as Chris spoke. I'll step down. I'll tell my father. I mean, the president. Excuse me, but it would be inconvenient if you twisted the facts when you talk to the president. Can you put him on speakerphone and clearly explain to him why you tried to remove me from the negotiation? I heard a pained voice, but he had no time left to mull it over. The moment Chris started speaking, I knew I had won. The negotiation was successfully concluded. I arrived at the hotel room 10 minutes late and began the negotiation. I advised Chris to avoid speaking English for those 10 minutes. Amusingly, he had memorized the Arabic phrase, "Mike will be here soon," and kept repeating it doggedly. The reason I could arrive just 10 minutes late was that David had booked me a room on another floor of the hotel. Anticipating this situation, although I could have been there before the negotiations started, David suggested I arrive late to teach Chris a lesson. American people are known for their unpunctuality, but I made a joke about how they are like me. Discussing the same approaches to time between Arabs and American helped the conversation flow smoothly. Once the conversation became enjoyable, the contract was as good as signed. After seeing off our guests, I took a deep breath. Chris, who had been frozen in the corner of the room, slumped into a chair, unable to stand any longer due to the tension. Seeing his pitiful son, John said thanks to me. I'm sorry, what my son, even Chris, did is inexcusable. We plan to impose severe disciplinary actions. Dad. Chris's pitiful voice was silenced by a sharp glare from John. I understand. EVP David is also aware of this situation. Shall we discuss the disciplinary actions when we return to the office? As soon as we got back to the office, David, who had been called to the president's office, smiled when he saw my face. Judging by your expression, everything went well. Was the hotel comfortable? Thanks to you, I slept very well. Seeing John's puzzled expression, David laughed and explained our exchange. President, you know that EVP Chris told Mike yesterday that he was either fired or demoted. We couldn't afford to lose him, and we wanted you to understand Chris's misconduct. So, we asked him to help expose the company's issues. David explained. I added, if I had reported EVP Chris's actions myself, you would have been skeptical. Even when EVP David told you, you didn't take it seriously. John looked embarrassed. You're right. I apologize, David. It's okay. We thought hard about how to make you understand. We had to corner EVP Chris so he would confess everything himself. John turned and shouted at the cowering Chris. I took you in because you had nowhere else to go. And this is how you repay me. This is like being bitten by my own dog. Write your resignation letter today. But at least let me stay until I find another job. John's glare made Chris tremble. If you don't want to resign, then you can be fired. You had no problem threatening Mike with the same choice. Okay, I'll write it. I'll write it. Watching Chris rush to HR, I struggled to suppress my laughter. Chris submitted his resignation that same day, and it was processed immediately. At the next week's morning meeting, John detailed Chris's misdeeds and announced that those who aided him would face appropriate consequences. As promised, those who had reluctantly aided Chris's wrongdoing were transferred to unimportant positions. Some couldn't bear the scrutiny and resigned. However, it was a good trend that the company started hiring people in their late 30s to 40s to fill the gaps. Additionally, young employees who hadn't been able to fully showcase their abilities began to stand out and excel. Previously, the environment had been stifling because anyone who stood out would be sabotaged, so everyone had been cautious. Removing the major problem that was Chris revitalized the company in a way. Meanwhile, Chris is still struggling to find a job. After all, for 5 years, he had only honed his skills in undermining others, so this was his just desserts. But while I understand the need for drastic measures, why did you hide the fact that you speak 7 languages? That's a huge asset for job hunting. John asked curiously after Chris was ousted. I chuckled and explained. It was more of a hindrance than an asset for me. I've always loved languages and spent most of my student years studying them. So by the time I graduated college, I could speak 7 languages. Initially, I used this skill to get a job as a new graduate, but soon realized I was only given interpreting and translating tasks. No matter how much I wanted to handle negotiations myself, I was just interpreting conversations for the executives. Even if I knew how to make the deal more beneficial, I couldn't say anything. Frustrated, I requested a transfer from my then superior, but he crushed my request. They told me that an interpreter doesn't need brains, just a mouth that works. My colleagues didn't support me either. Instead, they talked behind my back and attacked me mercilessly whenever I made a mistake. Since I was always called to the important negotiation meetings, they mistakenly thought I was being favored and became jealous. I realized I'd eventually be crushed if I stayed in that environment, so I quit. The same thing happened at the second and third companies. I was used for convenience and faced the same jealousy and resentment. So, I thought it might be a mistake to emphasize my language skills. That's why I mentioned career advancement during my interview at the fourth company. David saw through that lie immediately. Mike told me how the companies fell apart after he left. When people are driven by jealousy, they can do extreme things. The situation with EVP Chris is a prime example. I feared our company might face a similar decline if we drove Mike out, so we teamed up for a drastic solution. John said thanks to David and me. Thank you for caring so much about the company, and thank you, Mike, for staying. I promise to repay you both someday. With a smile, John extended his hand and I shook it firmly. John kept his word. Next year, David became the president, and John moved up to chairman. David would serve as an interim president until the heir was ready, but he was extremely pleased. I was also promoted from sales manager to executive vice president. However, since I also serve as the sales manager, the whirlwind of business hasn't changed. My current mission is to develop reliable subordinates to distribute the workload. Even if they are employees with excellent language skills like I had, I won't let them be used merely for convenience. I firmly believe that it is a superior's duty to help various talents grow, and I keep this in mind as I diligently perform my daily tasks.
Before long, we'll be selling this house and moving into a high-rise condo, so you'd better start looking for a new place. Olivia's mother, Helen, sneered. Don't think for a second you'll be getting a dime of our father's inheritance, Lauren, she added with a cold edge in her voice. We're having you relinquish your right to it. Got that? My sister's words cut deep, her face twisted into a cruel mask. Lauren's boyfriend stood nearby, laughing as if the situation were some sick joke. It was unbearable. Our father's funeral had just ended, and they were already discussing money. The sheer callousness was too much to handle. I can't take this anymore, I shouted, my voice trembling with anger and pain. I'm cutting ties with all of you. Just as the words left my mouth, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a man standing there, someone who looked vaguely familiar. Let me introduce myself. I'm Olivia, 23 years old, and about to graduate from university. I'm not one to boast, but I consider myself strong-willed and patient. I've always been focused and dedicated to my studies, maintaining good grades throughout my academic career. I have dreams I'm determined to achieve, and although I'm generally content with my life, there's a significant worry that I can't shake. Olivia, come downstairs now. My mother's loud voice jolted me out of my thoughts. With a sigh, I reluctantly went downstairs, leaving behind the comfort of my studies. Mom, Lauren, what's going on? I was studying as usual, I said, trying to keep my frustration in check. You nerd. Still studying when university is almost over? What a hard worker. Lauren mocked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. She was always the center of attention, just like our mother had been in her younger days as a model. Now, Lauren was unemployed, using the excuse of helping around the house to avoid finding a job. We're going shopping. You stay here and clean the dishes, do the laundry, and don't forget to iron properly, my mother ordered, her tone leaving no room for argument. Also, we're out of detergent and a few other things, so you should go shopping too. I knew better than to talk back, so I simply nodded and agreed. Feeling the weight of their demands, I left the house, stressed but determined to get through the chores. As I began cleaning up the mess they'd left behind, I muttered to myself, I need to get on with this. My mother, a former beauty queen with a taste for luxury, had always favored my beautiful sister, leaving me in the shadows. Despite everything, I pressed on, knowing I had to stay strong. I've never been considered all that pretty, and to make matters worse, my family has always treated me like a maid, dumping all the housework and chores on me. My sister Lauren has taken full advantage of this, and I've been oppressed by them both since I was little. Yet, I've tolerated it because, despite everything, they are my family. Then one day, my phone rang. When I looked at the screen, it was Dad. Hello, Dad. It's been a while, I answered, feeling my mood lift instantly. Oh, Olivia, it has been a while. Are you doing okay? He asked, his voice warm and familiar. I'm doing great. How about you, Dad? It's nighttime there, right? How's work? I'd like to say I'm fine, but I've been having some headaches lately. I'm planning to see a doctor soon. How's school going for you? Dad, take care of yourself, okay? As for school, thanks to you, everything is going well. I'm studying hard to achieve my dream. That's my girl. You're always so diligent. Remember what I always tell you, be righteous and kind. Don't worry, Dad, I'm doing my best. That's my Olivia. I'll bring lots of souvenirs when I come home next time. After that conversation, I hung up the phone, feeling a mix of emotions. To put it bluntly, my family is well off, largely due to my father, Jerry, who has worked tirelessly, flying around the world for his job since he was young. Although he was often away, he was always kind to me, showering me with love whenever we had the chance to be together. I adored him more than anyone else. But to my mother, Helen, and my sister, Lauren, he was nothing more than an ATM. They lived lavishly off the money he earned without a second thought. Be righteous and kind, Olivia, he would always say. His presence was nurturing and supportive, and he was my rock, the reason I've been able to stay strong all these years. But then, several months after I graduated from university, something chilling happened. Olivia, Dad has, Helen burst into my room, her face as pale as a ghost. Apparently, my father had collapsed at the airport as soon as he returned home and was rushed to the hospital. The moment I heard the news, Lauren, Helen, and I headed to the hospital in a panic. When we arrived, we found my once strong and vibrant father lying frail and helpless. We suspect he's had a stroke, the doctor informed us. Despite receiving extensive treatment, my father's condition barely improved. He was left with severe physical paralysis and a speech impairment, unable to stand or speak properly. Seeing him in that state broke my heart. I knew I had to step up, so I made the difficult decision to put my dreams on hold and dedicate myself to caring for him at home. Predictably, Helen and Lauren completely ignored him, treating him as if he were useless. They didn't lift a finger to help with his care or even visit him. "Mom, Lauren, if you helped out with Dad's care once in a while, I'm sure it would make him really happy," I suggested, trying to appeal to their better nature. But they just brushed me off, continuing to live their lives as if nothing had changed. And so, I found myself alone, caring for the man who had been my only source of love and support in a family that seemed to have forgotten what those words even meant. I begged them for help, but their response was always the same. "We're too busy. You take care of Dad." So, I did. Every day, I sat by my father's side and told him about the beautiful weather, even though he could only manage a faint response. I dedicated myself to learning everything I could about caregiving. I kept the curtains open so he could see outside, prepared special meals for him, and arranged fresh flowers in his room every day. Although professional caregivers helped, I poured my heart into making sure he was comfortable, remembering how hard he had worked for us and how much love he had given. Whenever things got tough, I recalled my father's words. "Olivia, always be righteous and kind." Those words gave me the strength to carry on. But one day, I overheard a conversation between Helen and Lauren that shook me to my core. "Thanks to Dad's insurance money, I was able to buy that bag I wanted," Helen said, her tone casual, as if she were talking about pocket change. "I know, right? Thanks, Dad. Maybe I should get a new wallet too," Lauren chimed in. I bit my tongue, fighting the urge to yell at them. But then Helen said something even more shocking. If Dad were gone, we'd receive a few $100 million from his life insurance and inheritance. He's been saving up through his job and investments. "Wow, Mom. We should totally buy a luxury condo, and my boyfriend could live with us," Lauren replied, excitement in her voice. "Oh, I wish Dad would hurry up and die," Helen added with a sigh. I couldn't bear it any longer. My father was struggling to stay alive, and they were already spending his insurance money, fantasizing about a life of luxury after his death. It made me feel sick with anger and despair. Recently, they had been splurging on brand name items and even taking overseas trips, leaving my father and me behind. But I couldn't bring myself to tell my father any of this. He was already going through so much, and I didn't want to add to his pain. Pretending I hadn't heard their cruel conversation, I continued to devote myself to his care. Many friends and acquaintances came to visit him regularly, and it warmed my heart to see how much they loved him. One visitor in particular stood out, a distinguished older man in a suit and glasses. I wasn't sure of his exact role, but I guessed he was an executor from my father's company. He always greeted me politely, bowing his head, and I could tell he genuinely cared for my father. On the days when my father had visitors, his face seemed brighter, and I naively hoped these peaceful days would continue. But a few months later, my father suffered another stroke. This time, it was too much for him to fight off, and he passed away suddenly. My heart broke, knowing that the one person who had always loved me unconditionally was gone. I clung to my father's lifeless body, sobbing uncontrollably. Even my mother and Lauren shed tears this time, mourning the loss of my father. What followed was a blur, a whirlwind of events. There was the wake, the funeral, and all the necessary arrangements that had to be made. Despite being the chief mourner, my mother did nothing, and neither did Lauren. In the end, it was left to me to handle everything on my own, rushing through the procedures and trying to keep it all together. The wake concluded, and the funeral was attended by many people. The sheer number of flowers and the crowd that came to pay their respects spoke volumes about the kind of man my father had been. Seeing how much he was loved gave me a small sense of comfort. As the funeral proceeded, the sound of sobbing filled the air, and with a peaceful expression on his face, my father began his final journey. By the evening of the 7th day after his passing, I was just beginning to recover from the initial shock and sadness. As I was tidying up after the day's rituals, my mother and Lauren called me into the living room. Sitting next to Lauren was a man she introduced as her fiancé. He was handsome like her, but knowing he used to be a male stripper, his frivolous nature was clear. His name was Larry. "So, about your father's inheritance," my mother began, and I felt a terrible sense of dread. Then, with a scornful laugh, she said something outrageous. "We're going to get a lot from your father's inheritance, so we've decided to sell this house and move into a luxury condo. You need to move out." "Mom, it's only been a week since Dad passed away, and you're already talking about the inheritance and a luxury condo?" I asked, horrified. "We've already signed the contract," she said nonchalantly. "It's a brand new high-rise." "You've already signed? When did this happen?" I asked, trying to make sense of it all. "About a month ago, I guess," she replied, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "A month ago? But Dad was still alive and he was practically dying." "He had a lot of money, so it'll work out fine," my mother interrupted, as selfish as ever. Lauren chimed in. "Yes, that's right. The luxury condo is for Mom, me, and my fiancé. You're just in the way, so you should hurry up and find some shabby apartment." "Even you, sis? Are you serious?" I asked, stunned by her coldness. "Of course. And don't even think about getting any of Dad's inheritance. We'll make sure you renounce it. You understand, right?" Lauren said, approaching me with a terrifying expression, while Larry stood by, laughing. Their greed and callousness were suffocating. They had the nerve to talk about this while my father's mourning period wasn't even over. The betrayal was too much to bear. "You guys are the worst. I can't stand it anymore," I said, my voice filled with anger and despair. "I'm cutting ties with both of you," I declared, my voice shaking with emotion. "Good riddance," my mother and Lauren sneered, their laughter cutting through me like a knife. I clenched my fists, trembling with a mix of anger and sorrow. Just then, the doorbell rang. I wiped away my tears, trying to steady my breath before opening the door. I assumed it was a late visitor offering condolences. "Good evening. My deepest condolences for your loss," said the man standing at the entrance, bowing deeply. It was the middle-aged man in a suit and glasses who had frequently visited my father. "Thank you, please come in," I stammered, about to invite him inside. But before I could, the man handed me his business card. "Please take a look at this. My name is Eric, an attorney assigned by your father." I glanced at the card, which indeed belonged to a law firm. For the first time, I noticed the lawyer's badge gleaming on his chest. I was taken aback. "A lawyer?" I echoed, surprised. My mother, Lauren, and her boyfriend appeared behind me, curious about the visitor. "What does a lawyer want with us?" my mother asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "I'm here to discuss your husband's inheritance. May we talk for a moment?" Eric replied calmly. We all moved to the living room. My mother sat directly across from Eric, with Lauren and her boyfriend beside her. I found myself alone, seated opposite them. Eric pulled out several documents from his bag, looked at us, and began to speak slowly. "First, may I read your husband's will?" he asked. That man could barely move or speak, and yet he left a will? "Get on with it," my mother snapped, irritation clear in her tone. "Very well," Eric said softly. He began to read. "The testator, Jerry, hereby bequeaths all property belonging to him to his second daughter, Olivia." The room fell into a stunned silence. Eric was about to continue when Lauren interrupted. "Wait a minute. What did you just say? Did he really say that?" she demanded, her voice rising. "The testator, Jerry, hereby bequeaths all property belonging to him to his second daughter, Olivia," Eric repeated. "What does that mean?" my mother and Lauren exclaimed in unison. I was too shocked to react, barely able to breathe as I tried to process what I had just heard. Eric continued, turning his attention to me. Next, I will read the postscript of the will. This is your father's final message. I listened quietly, my heart pounding in my chest as Eric read aloud. Olivia, you gave up your precious dreams to take care of me. I wasn't able to pay much attention to you because... His voice trailed off, but the message was clear. My father had acknowledged the sacrifices I made, and he left everything to me as a final gesture of love and gratitude. I was always busy with work, but I truly appreciate everything you did for me. Thanks to you, I was able to pass away peacefully and with a sense of fulfillment. As Eric read my father's final words, tears welled up in my eyes. Olivia, always be kind and true. I know you can do it. Your father will always be watching over you. Please be happy. All I could do was sob in front of them. Meanwhile, Helen and Lauren were in a frenzy. What does that mean? So, the inheritance all goes to her? What happens to our money? They demanded, their voices rising in panic. Eric glanced at them briefly before responding. You two are not mentioned in the will. Furthermore, Olivia is also the sole beneficiary of the life insurance. What are you talking about? How can that be allowed? Helen's face turned beet red, ready to explode with anger. Isn't there something called a statutory portion that's guaranteed to the wife and children? Lauren leaned forward eagerly, hoping for some loophole. You're referring to the statutory reserve, Eric said calmly. Indeed, you both have the right to claim a statutory reserve from the inheritance Olivia will receive. Helen seemed to regain some of her usual composure. Even if there's a will, if its contents are unfair, we can claim our share of the inheritance as prescribed by law. Eric continued. However, Jerry had us investigate the fact that both of you, Helen and Lauren, were living extravagantly off his money, squandering it on luxury items and trips. He knew everything but chose not to confront you directly. Helen and Lauren's eyes widened in shock. Yes, Eric said. You purchased a luxury condo, a car, and spent lavishly at host clubs and on overseas trips, all while leaving the caregiving and household chores to Olivia. There were even remarks made wishing for Jerry's death. My father knew everything. He knew everything but pretended not to. I whispered, overwhelmed by the revelation. Helen stammered. That's not true. Eric responded calmly. Given these circumstances, it's highly unlikely that a court would deem the will's distribution unfair. You are free to contest it, but I will be representing Olivia in that case. My mother's face turned pale, and Lauren muttered in disbelief. This is ridiculous. As Eric prepared to leave, I walked him to the door. He turned to me and said, Olivia, you've grown up to be quite admirable. Your father always spoke of you with such pride and joy. Really? I asked, touched by his words. Yes. I've known your father since we were young, and it was an honor to take on this request. Your father felt he had been too lenient with the others, but I believe he found peace knowing how well you've turned out. Eric smiled warmly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I was so touched by his words that tears welled up in my eyes again. Please live a happy life from now on. You know I'm always here to help, Eric said kindly as he left. I bowed deeply in gratitude, feeling a sense of hope for the future. 2 years later, with Eric's help, I successfully inherited all of my father's assets. As for my mother and sister, things took a different turn. My mother, unable to keep up with the loans for the high-rise condominium, lost everything. The expensive car and designer goods were repossessed, and she eventually went bankrupt. My sister, on the other hand, was quickly abandoned by her boyfriend when he found out she wouldn't be inheriting anything. I heard through the grapevine that she's now living with my mother and working part-time. For a while they tried to contact me, but I consistently replied, I've cut ties with you. Please contact me through a lawyer. I believed that was what my father would have wanted, and eventually, they stopped reaching out altogether. As for me, I used my father's inheritance to pursue a dream I had once given up on. I enrolled in law school. Originally, I had wanted to become a prosecutor, inspired by my father's words to always be kind and true. But after working closely with Eric, who had been my rock during such a difficult time, my dream changed. I began to admire the role of a lawyer, someone who provides justice and support when it's needed most. Now, I'm studying hard to become a lawyer, just like Eric, someone who is always fair, just, and kind.
This story is titled, My Mom Spent $17,000 of My Money on a Secret Trip, but I froze the account and ruined their vacation. Hey everyone, I don't usually post stuff like this, but I need to see some perspectives. Let me start from the beginning to give you all the context. Growing up, my family wasn't what you'd call picture perfect. My parents split when I was 8, and from there, my life kind of split too. I stayed with my mom most of the time, while my dad moved out and became the weekend parent. Now let me tell you about my dad. He's the kind of guy you read about in those motivational parenting posts. Solid, dependable, and always putting me first. Even after the divorce, he made sure I never felt like I was missing out. He'd take me to the park, help me with school projects, and never missed a single birthday. My mom, on the other hand, well, let's just say she had a different approach to parenting. Not long after the divorce, my mom met Carl. He was this flashy guy who worked in sales and seemed to have his life together, or so I thought. He played the part of the cool stepdad. He'd bring me candy, crack jokes, and act like he genuinely cared. But everything changed when my half-sister Tina was born. Suddenly, I wasn't just the kid from mom's first marriage, I was an outsider. It didn't happen overnight, but little things started piling up. Carl would make comments like, "Don't you want to spend more time with your dad?" Or, "It must be tough not having your real family around." It wasn't just the comments, it was the way Carl acted. Like I was some stray dog who wandered in uninvited. He'd rearrange the living room and make my things disappear, saying stuff like, "This house isn't a storage unit for your dad's leftovers." Mom, who used to back me up, just laughed it off. And then there was Tina. As soon as she could babble, Carl treated her like she was made of gold. I went from being mom's kid to feeling like a guest in her life. At first, I brushed it off, but then mom started acting differently too. She was less interested in what I was doing at school, stopped asking how my weekends with dad went, and seemed completely absorbed in her new little family. When I was 13, I overheard a conversation that flipped my world upside down. I was getting a glass of water late at night when I heard Carl talking to mom in the kitchen. "We don't need Sophia's child support anymore," Carl said, his voice low but firm. "My promotion covers everything. She'd be better off with Mark anyway." Mark, by the way, is my dad. Mom didn't even argue. She just said, "You're right. I'll talk to him tomorrow." I stood there, frozen. It wasn't like I was some burden who needed to be shipped off, but that's exactly how they made me feel. The next day, Mom sat me down with this fake sympathetic smile and said, "Sweetie, we've been thinking, and we believe you'd have more opportunities living with your dad full-time. It's what's best for you." Translation: we don't need you anymore. So, I packed my things and moved in with Dad. And you know what? It turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. My dad didn't just take me in. He made me feel like I belonged. He gave me the bigger bedroom in his apartment, painted it my favorite color, and even let me pick out new furniture. He didn't pry into why I was moving in, or make me feel awkward about it. He just said, "This is your home now." From that point on, it was me and Dad against the world. When college applications rolled around, he was right there with me, helping me write essays and figure out finances. He paid for everything, even when I tried to tell him I could take out loans. Your education is my responsibility, he'd say, brushing off any argument. I ended up getting into a great school and graduated with a solid job lined up. Dad was so proud, and honestly, I wouldn't have been able to do any of it without him. Fast forward a few years, and life was good. I had my own place, a great job, and still saw Dad every Sunday for dinner. But then, last year, everything changed. Dad got diagnosed with late-stage cancer. It was like the ground disappeared beneath me. One day he was fine, and the next, he was in the hospital talking about treatment plans and percentages I didn't want to hear. He fought hard, but it wasn't enough. Within 4 months, he was gone. Losing Dad was the hardest thing I've ever been through. He was my rock, my constant, the one person who never let me down. After the funeral, I felt completely adrift. Sure, I had friends and a good job, but nothing filled the void he left behind. When I went through his will, I discovered he'd left me everything. His apartment, his savings, and a small stock portfolio. It added up to about $300,000. I couldn't even think about the money at first. It felt like blood money, a constant reminder of what I'd lost. For months, I just went through the motions. Work, home, repeat. Then, one random day, my phone rang. My mom called me from an odd number. I hadn't heard from my mom in years. Like, not even a text. Then suddenly, there she was, calling me out of nowhere. I almost didn't pick up. Figured it was probably a scam call. But something in me hesitated. Sophia, it's your mom. I froze. She wasn't sure if I'd listen. I wanted to say I'm so sorry about your dad. I only just heard. How are you holding up? Holding up? I wanted to laugh. My dad had been gone for months. Where was she when I was drowning in funeral arrangements and figuring out how to live without the only parent who ever gave a damn about me? But instead of saying any of that, I just mumbled, I'm okay, I guess. She kept talking, saying things like, I've been thinking about you so much, and I know I wasn't there for you like I should have been. But she caught me off guard saying, I'd really like to see you again. Maybe we can have coffee or something? At first, I wanted to say no. What did she expect? That she could just waltz back into my life after years of radio silence? But here's the thing. Losing Dad left this massive hole in my life. For the first time ever, I felt completely alone. No siblings to call, no family to lean on. Just me in an empty apartment that still smelled like the lasagna leftovers Dad used to bring over every Sunday. So, yeah, I said yes. Not because I trusted her or even really wanted to see her, but because I couldn't shake the idea that maybe she'd changed. Grief does weird things to people, right? Maybe losing her husband had made her realize what's actually important. We met up at this little coffee shop downtown. I showed up 10 minutes late on purpose, half hoping she'd bail before I got there. But nope, there she was, sitting at a corner table, nursing a latte. Sophia, she said, standing up and pulling me into this awkward hug before I could dodge her. It's so good to see you. I sat down, feeling stiff and out of place. Yeah, you too. Total lie, but whatever. She dove straight into the small talk, asking about my job, my apartment, my travels. It was all surface-level stuff, like she was trying to feel me out. I kept my answers short, giving her just enough to keep the conversation from dying. Eventually, she got to the point. I've been thinking about everything that happened when you were younger, she said, staring into her coffee cup, like it held the answers to life's big question. I know I wasn't the best mom to you. I made a lot of mistakes. No kidding. I really want to make things right, she continued. I know it's a lot to ask, but I'd like us to start over. Build a real relationship. Part of me wanted to laugh in her face. Build a relationship? Now? After years of making me feel like an afterthought? But another part of me, the part that missed having family, wanted to believe her. Why now? I asked, folding my arms. Why not? I don't know. 5 years ago? 10 years ago? She sighed, looking down at her coffee. Because I was selfish, Sophia. I was wrapped up in my own life and didn't realize how much I was missing. Losing Carl made me see things differently. I blinked. What do you mean, losing Carl? She looked up at me, her expression a mix of sadness and hesitation. He passed away a few months ago. Heart attack. I stared at her, completely blindsided. Carl, the man who'd made me feel like I didn't belong in my own home, the one who'd convinced her to send me to live with Dad, was dead? And this was the first I was hearing of it? Why didn't you tell me? I asked. I didn't think you'd care, she said quietly, like that was supposed to make it better. But after he was gone, it made me realize how much time I've wasted, how much I've lost. I sat there, trying to process. It wasn't like I'd ever liked Carl, but hearing that he was gone hit me in a weird way. I wanted to feel bad for her, but another part of me, the part that remembered how easily she'd cast me aside for his sake, couldn't muster much sympathy. I know I can't make up for the past, she continued, her voice cracking just slightly. But I want to try, if you'll let me. I didn't trust her. Not entirely. But there was this tiny voice in the back of my head saying, what if she means it? What if this is my one chance to have some kind of relationship with my mom? So I gave her the benefit of the doubt. We started meeting up more regularly after that. Coffee here, lunch there. At first, it was weird. I wasn't used to her asking about my life or acting like she actually cared, but over time, I started to let my guard down. She even brought Tina into the mix. My half-sister, the golden child, was now 22 and still living at home. She was in this weird limbo where she was between jobs, but not really trying to find one. Mom introduced us like we were strangers, which, to be fair, we basically were. Tina acted all casual, like we hadn't spent most of our childhood ignoring each other. Mom's been talking about you nonstop. It's kind of annoying. I laughed, mostly out of awkwardness, and said something like, yeah, well, she's got a lot to catch up on. Despite everything, I actually started to like Tina. She was funny in that sarcastic, self-deprecating way, and we bonded over how ridiculous Mom could be sometimes. Before I knew it, I was visiting their place every couple of weeks. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small house on the outskirts of town, but it felt weirdly familiar. Mom would cook dinner, Tina would tell some over-the-top story about a failed job interview, and for a second, it almost felt like I had a family again. Almost. Because no matter how nice things seemed on the surface, there was always this nagging feeling in the back of my mind, like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then came the moment that changed everything. My mom sat me down after one of our family dinners, if you can even call it that, and dropped this whole story about needing back surgery. Apparently, it was serious, like life or death levels of serious. The doctor says if I don't get it soon, I might not be able to walk properly again, she said, clutching her back. The problem is, the surgery's expensive, and my insurance won't cover it. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process. How much? $20,000 up front, she said, like it was no big deal. 20 grand? Who just casually asks for that kind of money? I mean, sure, I was doing well, but I wasn't exactly Jeff Bezos. I wouldn't ask, but I don't know what else to do, she added, her voice cracking for dramatic effect. I hate being in this position, Sophia. I should have been suspicious right then and there. I mean, this was a woman who'd ghosted me for years, only to resurface after Dad died. But grief does weird things to you. Losing Dad had left me raw, and the thought of Mom going through something serious, even after everything, made me feel sick. Fine, I said finally. I'll help. But only half now. I want to see the hospital bill before I pay the rest. Her eyes lit up like she'd just won the lottery. Thank you, Sophia. You don't know what this means to me. I transferred $17,000 to her account that night. A week later, she and Tina packed their bags and left for the surgery. They were supposedly flying to a specialist hospital out of state. Something about it being the best place for this kind of procedure. I didn't question it much because, honestly, I didn't want to think about it too hard. Part of me wanted to trust her, to believe that this time she was being honest, even though a little voice in my head kept whispering, something doesn't feel right. For the first couple of days, I checked in. How's it going? I texted. Mom replied with the usual, it's a process. Lots of tests first. The surgery is tomorrow. I'll keep you updated. Fair enough. I wasn't expecting hourly updates or anything, so I let it slide. I told myself to stop overthinking it. She was my mom, after all. And this was serious, but that nagging feeling in the back of my mind didn't go away. And then Christmas rolled around, and things started to feel off. I was scrolling through Instagram, half watching a cheesy holiday movie, when I got a DM from my friend Rachel. She's the type of a friend who got all the news, so when I saw her name on the screen, I knew she's up to something. Hey, I thought your mom was having surgery. Check this out. Attached was a screenshot of Tina's latest Instagram story. And let me tell you, it wasn't exactly what I was expecting. Instead of a hospital room or a recovery selfie, it was a picture of Tina posing in front of the Eiffel Tower. I stared at my phone, thinking maybe it was some kind of glitch, or an old photo she'd reposted. But nope, the timestamp was clear. Posted 10 minutes ago. What the hell? I clicked through her stories, my stomach tightening with every swipe. There was Tina shopping at a designer boutique, posing with Mom in front of some Christmas market in Paris. Paris. Not exactly known for its groundbreaking back surgery. At first, I didn't want to believe it. Maybe there was some explanation. Maybe they had a layover in Paris and decided to stretch their legs? Yeah, I know. It sounds stupid now, but I was grasping at straws. But as the hours went on, more stories popped up. There was Tina flaunting a Louis Vuitton shopping bag. Mom smiling in front of a 5-star hotel. Even a group photo with my Aunt Karen and cousin Emma, who I didn't even know were involved in this whole thing. By Christmas morning, the denial was gone. This wasn't a layover. This was a full-blown vacation, and I just financed it. I called Mom that morning, trying to keep my voice steady. Hey, just checking in. How's recovery going? Oh, sweetie, she said, her tone all syrupy. It's going great. The doctor said the surgery was a success. I'm starting physical therapy tomorrow. Physical therapy? Tomorrow? Was she planning to do squats in front of the Louvre? That's good to hear, I said, gritting my teeth. Where are you staying? The hospital or a hotel? Oh, the hospital has this partnership with a recovery center, she said quickly. It's very comfortable. Comfortable? Yeah, I bet. Probably has a minibar and room service too. I wanted to blow up right then and there, but something stopped me. Maybe it was shock, or maybe I just needed to hear her lie one more time to really let it sink in. Over the next few days, I played along. I kept texting her, asking for updates, and she kept feeding me the same garbage. The therapist says I'm progressing faster than expected. They're so impressed with my recovery. Meanwhile, Tina was still posting nonstop. By now, she'd moved on to flexing their meals, plates of food that looked more expensive than my monthly rent. At one point, Rachel texted me again. Did you see this? It was a photo of Mom and Tina lounging by a pool at what looked like a private villa. The caption? Living our best lives. Blessed. Yeah, blessed. Courtesy of my $17,000. At that point, I knew I couldn't let it slide. I started digging. So I called the hospital Mom had supposedly gone to. After being transferred 3 times, I finally got someone on the phone who confirmed what I already knew. No record of her. Then I checked the flight details she'd sent me. Sure enough, they matched a trip to Paris, not to some specialist hospital out of state. The final nail in the coffin was a message from my cousin Emma. Thanks for covering the villa, she wrote. This place is amazing. I stared at the screen, my blood boiling. Villa? Since when was I covering a villa? That night, I made my decision. I froze the account I had set up for the second payment. Then, I sent Mom one last text. I know you're not at a hospital. Don't contact me again. Her response came within minutes. Sophia, it's not what you think. Please let me explain. But I wasn't interested in explanation. However, my mom and Tina aren't the type to let things slide. Not when there's more chaos to stir up. A few days after New Year's, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Sophia, it's your mother. Please, we need to talk. It's urgent. Classic. Even when blocked, she found a way to weasel through. Urgent? Sure. Because everything with her is a crisis when it doesn't go her way. I stared at the message for a second before tossing my phone on the couch. Yeah, not happening. Over the next week, I got calls from random numbers, emails from throwaway accounts, even a couple of Facebook messages from Tina. They all had the same vibe. We need to clear the air. You don't understand the whole story. Please unblock us. What was there to clear up? I'd caught them red-handed, sipping espresso in Paris with my money. There wasn't exactly a lot of gray area here. But then, things got weirder. One day, while I was at work, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email, and the subject line read, Urgent, hospital bill attached. I opened it, and sure enough, there was an attachment labeled invoice.pdf. When I opened it, I had to fight the urge to roll my eyes into the next dimension. It was the most obvious forgery I'd ever seen. The hospital logo was blurry and stretched, like they'd copied it off a Google image search. The address wasn't even for a hospital. It was for some random medical supply store in California. Oh, and let's not forget the pièce de résistance. The payment details section listed my mom's personal bank account. Seriously? This was their big play? A fake invoice that looked like it had been thrown together in Microsoft Paint? I decided to call them out, but not directly. Instead, I replied to the email with a single sentence. Please have the hospital contact me directly for payment verification. Less than an hour later, I got a frantic response. No, that won't be necessary. The hospital only accepts payment through my account because of their unique billing system. Unique billing system? Yeah, and I'm the Queen of England. I didn't reply. That weekend, I got another surprise, this time from my cousin Emma. She called me out of nowhere, which was weird because we'd barely spoken in years. Hey, Sophia, she said, her tone a little too casual. I just wanted to check in. How are you doing? I knew right away she wasn't calling just to catch up. What's up, Emma? Well, I was just wondering if you've talked to Aunt Linda recently, she said, referring to my mom. I sighed. Nope, and I'm not planning to. There was a long pause. She mentioned something about being in a tough spot, Emma said carefully. She didn't go into details, but it sounded serious. Serious, huh? Like not being able to pay for her villa rental? Or maybe struggling to cover her Louis Vuitton addiction? I didn't say any of that, though. I just told Emma, she made her choices. It's not my problem anymore. The next week, the desperation hit a new level. Tina kept posting on social media about how their wealthy relative had abandoned them in a foreign country after promising to help. She didn't name me outright, but it was obvious who she was talking about. One post had a picture of her and my mom sitting on their luggage at an airport, looking all sad and defeated. The caption read, "We trusted someone, and they left us stranded. Never again." I wanted to reply so badly. I wanted to post the receipts, the fake hospital bill, the Paris vacation photos, everything. But I knew it wasn't worth it. Engaging with their pity party would only make me look bad. Instead, I just screenshot everything and saved it for later. A few days after that, Rachel called me with another update. "You're not going to believe this," she said, barely able to contain her laughter. "What now?" I asked, bracing myself. "Tina started a GoFundMe," Rachel said. "She's trying to raise $20,000 to recover from being stranded abroad." I burst out laughing. "Oh, come on. Who's falling for that?" Apparently not many people. Rachel sent me the link, and the fundraiser had only raised about $150, mostly from distant relatives who probably didn't know the full story. I'll admit, I was tempted to donate $1 just to leave a comment like, "Should have budgeted better," but I resisted. Eventually, reality started to catch up with them. The villa they'd rented in Paris? Turns out they hadn't paid the full balance, and the owner was threatening to call the police. They ended up selling off most of the designer stuff they'd bought to cover the costs. When they finally made it back home, things started falling apart fast. Tina had lost her part-time job because she'd stayed away for too long, and apparently, they hadn't paid the rent on time while they were off living their best lives in Paris. Of course, Mom's go-to solution was to guilt-trip the rest of the family. She started calling anyone who would pick up, playing the victim, and trying to squeeze out some sympathy, and maybe a little cash. Grandma was the first to fill me in during one of our usual calls. "Your mother called me this morning," she said. She was sobbing, going on about how unfair everything is and how nobody's helping her. "Unfair?" I said. "That's bold for someone who scammed me out of 10 grand to fund a vacation." "She's got some nerve," Grandma replied. "But don't worry, I didn't give her anything. I told her she made this mess and needs to clean it up herself." I sighed. "I'm sorry she's dragging you into this. You shouldn't have to deal with her nonsense." "Don't apologize," Grandma said. "You've done more than enough for her. If anything, I should have warned you. Your mother's always been like this, thinking tears will fix everything. I've had years of practice dealing with her, so don't let it weigh on you." Even though she brushed it off, I couldn't help feeling bad. "Still, it's not fair you had to deal with her calls. She's my problem, not yours. She's been pulling this kind of thing since before you were born. I'm used to it. What matters is you've stood your ground. You've done the right thing, and don't let her make you think otherwise." "Thanks," I said. "I just hate that it's come to this. I wish things could be different." "So do I," Grandma said. "But some people don't change, no matter how much you want them to. You're doing what's best for you, and that's what counts." By the time we hung up, I felt a bit better. Mom might have been stirring up trouble, but at least I had someone who understood and had my back. That was enough to keep me steady. But things didn't stop there. A couple of days later, my cousin Emma reached out to me. "Hey, Sophia, do you know what your mom and Tina have been saying about you?" I sighed. "Let me guess. It's somehow all my fault they're broke?" "Basically," Emma said. "But that's not even the worst part. Remember how they convinced me to chip in for emergencies during their trip? Turns out their emergency was a designer bag Tina just had to have. When I asked for the money back, your mom acted like I was being unreasonable and said I should have known it wasn't a loan. I felt my stomach drop. "You're kidding me." "Nope." And when I pushed, Tina called me greedy and said I wasn't supportive of family. I groaned. "Unreal. Did you tell them off?" "Oh, I did," Emma said. "It got ugly. I told them they're the ones who don't care about family, and I'm done bailing them out. Your mom started screaming about how nobody understands what she's been through, and Tina just rolled her eyes like it's all a big joke. I walked out and told them they're on their own." "Good for you," I said. But inside, I was fuming. They had no shame. None at all. I knew the rest of the story indirectly. I got a voicemail from my mom's landlord, which was already weird because I'd never met the guy in my life. "Hi, this is Mr. Randall, your mother's landlord. She mentioned you might be able to clarify some things regarding her rent situation. Can you please give me a call back?" "What?" I called him back, and what he told me had me absolutely floored. Apparently, my mom had spun this whole story about how I'd promised to pay her rent while she was away for medical reasons, and then backed out, leaving her in a financial hole. "She made it sound like you were supposed to be supporting her financially," the landlord said, sounding skeptical. "But honestly, it didn't add up, so I wanted to check with you directly." I was livid. "No, that's not true at all," I said. She lied to me about needing surgery to get money for a trip to Paris. I had no idea she was even behind on rent until now. The landlord sighed. That's what I figured. Well, thanks for clearing it up. I'll handle it from here. Handle it? I wasn't done. I called my mom immediately, and for once, she actually answered. Why is your landlord calling me about your rent? I demanded, before she could even say a word. There was a pause, and then she went full innocent act. Oh, I just mentioned you because I thought maybe you could help explain my situation. Explain your situation? You mean lie for you? My voice was shaking at this point. You told him I promised to pay your rent. What is wrong with you? Calm down, Sophia, she said, like I was the one being unreasonable. I only said that because I didn't know what else to do. He's threatening to evict me. Well, maybe you should have thought about that before you spent all your money shopping in Paris, I snapped. Her tone shifted immediately. I can't believe you're being so selfish, she hissed. After everything I've been through, you can't even help me out a little. I laughed, but it wasn't the funny kind. You've got to be kidding me. You lied to me, stole from me, and now you're dragging my name through the mud to cover your tracks. You're unbelievable. That's rich coming from you, she shot back. You've had everything handed to you, and now you're acting like you're better than us. At that point, I hung up. I was done arguing with her, but I wasn't done entirely. The next day, I called a lawyer. I explained everything, the fake surgery, the stolen money, the defamation, and asked what my options were. You have a strong case for a defamation claim, the lawyer said. We can also pursue legal action for fraud if you want to go that route. Fraud? That word hit me like a ton of bricks. It sounded so serious, but when I thought about it, that's exactly what it was. Mom had conned me out of 10 grand and then tried to ruin my reputation when it backfired. I didn't hesitate. Let's do it, I said. Filing the lawsuit was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was also the most liberating. Mom and Tina tried to talk me out of it, of course. Tina sent me a long, rambling message about how I was tearing the family apart and how money isn't everything. Funny, because when it was my money, apparently, it meant a whole lot to them. Mom even tried to play the victim, saying I was destroying her life. The audacity was unreal. I mean, who exactly had been destroying whose life here? But I didn't back down. For once, I put myself first. It felt strange at first, like I was betraying some unspoken rule that I had to keep sacrificing for their benefit. But I stuck to my guns. It wasn't just about the money. It was about principle. It was about finally standing up and saying, enough. The case dragged on for months. I won't lie. There were moments I doubted myself. The legal fees piled up. The constant back and forth with my lawyer was draining. And every time I heard from Mom or Tina, I felt nauseous. But I reminded myself why I was doing this. To set things straight, to hold them accountable, and to prove, to them and to myself, that I wasn't going to let them take advantage of me ever again. In the end, the court sided with me. Mom and Tina had to pay back the $17,000, and the defamation claim ensured they couldn't pull the same stunt again. I can't even describe the feeling of walking out of that courtroom knowing I'd won, not just the case, but my freedom from their BS. After the case was over, I cut ties with them completely. No more calls, no more texts, no more second chances. They'd crossed every line, and I wasn't about to let them back into my life. It wasn't an easy decision. I mean, cutting off family is never simple, but it was necessary. Sometimes you've got to protect your own peace, even if it means walking away from the people who are supposed to be closest to you. The funny thing is, once the dust settled, I didn't feel angry anymore. It wasn't about holding a grudge or plotting revenge. It was just indifference. Like they were strangers I used to know. They made their choices, and I made mine. And honestly, I'm better off without them. These days, I focus on myself. I've reconnected with old friends, started traveling again, and even got a promotion at work. Life feels lighter without their chaos hanging over me, and I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. And yeah, I've learned a lot through this whole mess. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone dealing with toxic family members, it's this. You're not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. If they're not willing to respect you, you're not obligated to stick around. You owe it to yourself to walk away, even if it feels like the hardest thing in the world. So, yeah, that's the story. It's messy, it's ridiculous, but it's mine. If you've ever dealt with entitled family members, you get it. Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and let them deal with the fallout on their own. Life's too short to keep waiting for people to change when you already know they won't. Anyway, thanks for reading if you made it this far. Hope this gives someone out there the courage to put themselves first for once. Trust me, it's worth it.